Hey, this is Peggy Morgan from season 18 of The Ultimate Fighter, and I'm going to talk about the 4th episode, which not shockingly begins with drama between the coaches. This time not so much between Ronda and Miesha as between our striking coach Edmund and creepy Dennis Hallman, who Miesha brought in as a guest coach. In case you've forgotten, Dennis Hallman is best known as the guy whose nuts fell out of his thong at UFC 133. I have a little picture to refresh your memory. Here you go. So anyway, that guy and our striking coach Edmund were pretty pissed off at each other and were ready to fight. As much as Dana kind of made it sound like our coaching staff was just looking for a reason to get Miesha's coaching staff, Miesha's coaches were kind of needling our coaches. For instance, one time we came into the Team Rousey locker room and somebody had left a little gift card for a brow wax that was made out for Edmund because he has that like thick eyebrow, which Ronda took as extremely racist because I guess the thick eyebrows are just part of being Armenian, so she saw it as they were attacking his Armenianness. And we ended up hiding the gift card from Edmund because we didn't want him to get more angry than he already was. I think he eventually found out, but it took a few weeks. One thing, I learned a lot from being on The Ultimate Fighter, and one big lesson that I took out of it is you do not ever want to fuck with an Armenian. There was never any doubt in my mind that Edmund would have fought Dennis Hallman in the parking lot. So when Ronda kind of pushed past him to go confront Dennis herself in the gym, I know some people are going to look at that as like, oh, Edmund was being a pussy and he was letting Ronda defend him. But I don't really see it that way. I see it as more it was better for everybody there if Ronda dealt with it than if we let Edmund deal with it. So yeah. And just the fact that Dana was there suggests that he kind of took it as a serious issue, because Dana really didn't spend a lot of time hanging out at the UFC gym. He's usually only there for fights or if there's a problem. So if Dana showed up on a non-fight day, we knew some shit was going down. So yeah, Dana's presence there meant that he took it as like a real threat and a real problem. So one of the things that I really liked about this particular episode was how much they focused on the two women fighting. In this instance, I think the fighters were about as interesting as the fight itself. It was a good fight, but Jessica and Roxy are just really interesting people. Jessica was definitely the house mom. She and I kind of had this bond because we were the two mothers in the house, and our sons are really close in age. Her son Jesse is almost exactly a year older than my son Oliver. So we kind of understood what each other was going through with that. Like sometimes we'd just be sitting quietly and she'd look at me and go, oh, I miss Jessie. And I would know exactly what she meant, whereas maybe other people wouldn't understand. But beyond that, she and I were so completely different. Like she is like very, very maternal, very, very OCD, and I'm kind of more, I don't know, you might have heard, but I don't really give a fuck. So I didn't really care if people were messing up the kitchen, or if there was like ring around the bathtub, or if I left water bottles out all over the dresser, which completely like made Jessica insane. So one of the funny interactions that they haven't really shown much is she and I sharing a bunk. She was on the bottom bunk and I was on the top bunk, and I spent a lot of time just like accidentally dropping shit from my bunk onto her bunk, and it would piss her off so bad. Like she tried to be cool about it and not flip out on me because she's very diplomatic, but I knew it was driving her completely nuts. Probably like the thing that brought her the closest to snapping was I used to sleep with these wax earplugs in because it gets kind of loud in the house at night. And, you know, around 2 or 3 in the morning when things started quieting down, I'd take them out because they were annoying and, like, stick them on this little ledge next to my mattress. And inevitably, they'd, like, fall off that onto her bunk. So there'd be, like, these gross used wax earplugs falling into her bunk. And she would just, like, lose her mind. My sheets and blankets are always slipping down there. I'd be, like, hanging bras off my headboard that would fall down. So she spent a lot of time, like, collecting my things and, like, handing them back to me, kind of like, yo, can you please quit dropping shit onto my bunk? Yeah, so I'm pretty sure she doesn't miss me. Then there's ROXANNE MODAFFERI, who I get asked about a lot just because she's such an anomaly. People are like really fascinated by Roxy. I remember seeing her at tryouts and thinking, like, who is this nerd? I kind of assumed she was just there to support somebody else, and then I saw her grappling and I was just floored because she doesn't look anything like a fighter or really act anything like a fighter, but she can throw down. Just like me and Jessica were kind of like bonded by the mom thing, Roxy and I were joined by our mutual nerdiness, but she's a completely different sort of nerd than I am. Like, she likes anime and speaking Japanese and non-Japanese speaking circumstances and making human figures out of toilet paper rolls. Like, Roxy is just like an incredibly childlike and sweet person. Like, she refused to swear at all. We actually somehow coached her into like dropping an F-bomb around week 5, and the fact that she actually did it just like astounded us. We didn't even know how to deal with it. And of course, immediately after, she got all embarrassed and apologized and felt terrible. And we kind of felt bad for coaching her into it. And she also like really either didn't understand or would be offended by sexual humor. Like when Anthony said, "Come over here so I can get a piece," and she said, "A piece of what?" Like, she actually didn't know. She had no clue what he was talking about. So like that sort of thing is just like, doesn't interest her and it doesn't appeal to her and kind of grosses her out. I've seen comments on Twitter like, there's no way any human being is as nice as Roxanne Modafferi. And I used to think the same thing. Like, for a long time I wonder, like, how is this possible? Where does this human come from? And I would actually ask her questions like, so were you like raised in a religious cult? Like, where did you grow up? What were your parents like? And it turns out that she hasn't led that sheltered of a life. She's not that much different from the rest of us in terms of experience. She just has this like extremely resilient nature where like the things that are ugly and gross in the world, just like she doesn't see them. So like her childlikeness and innocence is like innate and natural to her. And as a result, I think everybody in the house got extremely protective of her, because she kind of became like the house kid in a way, which you could almost see in that clip where she was attacking me with her alligator socks, and I was like, no, don't eat my leg, which is a lot like what I would do with my 3-year-old son if he was attacking me with alligator socks. It was kind of funny to see that because it reminded me of like how I viewed Roxy while I was living in the house with her. The fight between Roxy and Jessica was really, really hard for me to watch. I had a pretty good idea going into it that Jessica was probably going to knock Roxy out, just because Jessica has really, really strong hands. And even though Roxy's a strong grappler, I think Jessica's grappling was good enough to neutralize it. And Jessica's just, even though she's small too, she's a little bit stronger than Roxy. Roxy isn't incredibly physically strong, which definitely matters in this sport. A lot of people were underestimating Jessica because her MMA record wasn't very good. But I think that had a lot to do with the fact that she kind of transitioned from boxing to MMA before she was completely ready. Like, she didn't really have the ground skills yet, but she filled in the gaps, I think, and is actually a fairly strong grappler. I'm not an incredibly emotional person. Like, I don't cry a lot, and I definitely didn't want to cry on national TV. Like, going into this, that was one of my major goals. Like, I'm not going to be that girl that cries on TV. And I came really, really close at the end of that fight. Like, there were actually tears in my eyes, and I kind of had to put my head down and hide from the camera. And Shayna actually kind of had to get up and walk off, and when she came back, there were tears in her eyes too. It was hard for all of us. And I think it probably had something to do with the fact that we were all kind of emotional anyway. Like, we were all very, very tired at that point. We've been training hard. A lot of us were kind of injured. I was legitimately starving to death at that point. But it was hard. As happy as I was to see Jessica get the win, it was hard to do it at the expense of Roxy. A few people have asked me if I think the refs stopped that fight a little bit late. I can see where they're coming from in terms of it sucked to watch Roxy take those extra shots. But at the same time, they are professionals, and I like to see fighters get every chance to recover. And I have seen fighters get hit by shots like the one that Roxy got hit with and bring it back. So as much as it sucked to watch Roxy take those extra shots, I think letting the fight go to where it did was a good call. If I was in Roxy's position, I would have wanted the same thing. I wouldn't have wanted him to stop it before I'd had every opportunity to recover. That's about all I have for this week. Make sure to tune in next week. Davey Grant is going to be fighting Louis, who lives with his parents. And it's going to be an awesome episode. Davey is one of the most entertaining people I've ever met in my life. So we're going to get to see a lot of fun stuff from him. Also, don't forget to check out my blog on MMA Weekly. And I just want to say thanks to my coaches and training partners at Triumph BJJ and Mass BJJ. And also to Mike McCandless at smartpowders.com for all his help. So yeah, thanks. Talk to you guys next week.